G'day everybody, we are going to go through another contradiction. It's not Contradiction Tuesday, but it is in relation to this question that George7120 put out. He's a friend of the channel. He has said in one of his comments, the book of the Bible is a book of faith, not a book of history. There is no evidence that Jesus really existed. Now, I have gone through that, and I will put that at the end of the video, as well as it will be linked to this one. Actually, the two different genealogies of Joseph in the Gospels convinced me that Jesus is a fictional figure. So we want to go through that second question. Actually, are the two genealogies of Joseph in the Gospels, are they different? So my name is Craig, and this is Morning Star Quest, where we are journeying through the Bible one question at a time. And this is my co-host, Cosmo. Say hello. Oh, and we've lost the lights, but that's all right. We were just going to go through it because we've just been doing a few videos today and the battery ran out, but it's all good.
Welcome back, everyone. It's great to have you here. Let's dive into the genealogies of Joseph in the Gospels and see what's going on. The two genealogies you're referring to are found in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke.
Yes.
Let's start with Matthew. He traces Jesus' lineage through Joseph, listing David as an ancestor, and then goes on to show a line through Solomon. In contrast, Luke provides a different genealogy for Joseph, tracing the line through David, but through another son, Nathan. Now, the problem there is both of these are different. Does this stop you, like George7120, does this stop you from believing that Jesus is someone of history? Now, like I said, I went through the last video to prove that, yes, Jesus is part of history, but this is also another one of those proofs. But it could be, you might go through this and think, well, no, it proves that it doesn't exist, or he doesn't exist because of these genealogies. So I want to go through this one because I really do think it is an important thing that we need to discuss. So why? Oh no, I don't want to go to. Well, yeah, all right. Why do you think, Cosmo, that these genealogies are different? Because they are different, aren't they? The genealogies in Matthew and Luke are different in several ways. Matthew's genealogy lists Jesus as a descendant of King David through Solomon, while Luke traces Jesus' lineage through David's son Nathan. This means the two lists diverge quite early on. People think these genealogies are different because they present separate lines of descent from David. Matthew's list emphasizes Jesus' royal lineage, connecting him to the royal line of Judah, which is important for fulfilling Old Testament prophecies about the Messiah coming from David's house. Luke's genealogy, on the other hand, is sometimes seen as presenting a more priestly or legal line, showing Jesus' connection to David, but through a different branch. Some scholars suggest that Matthew's genealogy represents the legal line of descent, while Luke's could reflect a biological line or a different tradition.
All right, so let's just go with Matthew for the moment. Now, Matthew, his specific audience for the whole book is the Jewish people. So he wants to go with Jewish law and Jewish history. And do you think that influences his reason for what he's going with this? And does he go backwards or forwards through history with this genealogy line?
Yes, Matthew's audience was Jewish, so he emphasizes Jesus' connection to Jewish law and prophecy. His genealogy starts with Abraham and works forward to Jesus. This forward progression underscores Jesus' place in Jewish history and fulfills Old Testament prophecies about the Messiah coming from Abraham and David's line.
All right, and do you feel it like it jumps a little bit, or does it, when it's going through Matthew, does it go through a very strict lineage, or do you think it jumps, or do you think, what do you reckon?
Matthew's genealogy does skip some generations, which was common in Jewish genealogies to highlight key figures or fit a particular structure. For instance, he arranges the genealogy into 3 sets of 14 generations, which helps emphasize significant periods in Jewish history, rather than providing a complete chronological list.
So he wanted to go more the 3 sets of 14 So he wanted to make sure there was 3 sets of 14, which in actual fact it's probably not, but he just wanted to do that because he was trying to be poetic, or he wanted to try and make another point that's not really obvious, but it is there to the Jewish audience maybe.
Yes, exactly. Matthew's structure, with 3 sets of 14 generations, was likely meant to be symbolic, emphasizing the completeness and significance of Jesus' lineage in a way that resonated with Jewish readers. It was more about making a theological point than providing a strict historical record.
Right. So if he just went through exactly all the royal lineage, and it wouldn't have been 3 sets of 14, what difference would have that made?
If Matthew had listed every generation without fitting into the 3 sets of 14, it might have appeared less structured or symbolic. The pattern he chose was designed to highlight Jesus' importance and fulfill Jewish expectations of the Messiah. It wasn't just about historical accuracy, but also about conveying a deeper message.
Yeah, and I find this so fascinating is that, because this is more like we have King Charles at the moment, and if we would go backwards with his royal line, would we really follow that same consistency like we see in Matthew? Because we've got this royal way of looking at things, or England does, and so they would go through their history for the royal lineage in the same way.
Exactly. Royal lineages often follow certain patterns or highlights that reflect the significance of individuals rather than just listing every single descendant. It's similar to how Matthew structured his genealogy to emphasize Jesus' royal and messianic credentials. Just like with royal families today, there's a mix of historical fact and symbolic representation.
Okay, well, all right. Well, let's jump to Luke, because it's very different. Because instead of going backwards, it's going forwards. No. Instead of going forwards, it's going backwards. Sorry. And so in its going backwards, it's probably more. Well, it's a different way of going through it. What's the difference between Luke and Matthew?
In Luke's genealogy, he traces Jesus' lineage backward from Jesus all the way to Adam, emphasizing the universal aspect of Jesus' heritage. Unlike Matthew, who highlights Jesus' royal lineage and ties to David and Abraham, Luke's genealogy is more about connecting Jesus to all of humanity.
Oh.
Additionally, Luke's list differs significantly from Matthew's in terms of names and the inclusion of different ancestors.
So it's a different audience as well?
Exactly. Matthew's audience is primarily Jewish, so his genealogy focuses on linking Jesus to King David and Abraham, emphasizing Jesus' royal and messianic credentials. Luke's audience is more Gentile, and his genealogy aims to show Jesus' connection to all of humanity, going all the way back to Adam.
So if in the Gentile or non-Jewish people like the Greeks and all that, if they presented the royal lineage like they do with Matthew, would have they really got the connections or understood it?
Probably not. The Greeks and Romans didn't have the same emphasis on Jewish royalty and lineage. They were more interested in broader historical and philosophical connections. So Luke's approach would resonate more with them, showing Jesus as a figure connected to all humanity rather than just a royal lineage.
So really, there are 2 lineages for 2 very different audiences for very different reasons. Actually, there is one thing with Luke's genealogy is that, or like with Matthew's, I should say, there is this, because it's the royal line, we kind of get it's almost getting the people that should be.
Yes, Matthew emphasizes the royal lineage to connect Jesus to David and Abraham, highlighting his rightful place as the Messiah in Jewish tradition. Luke, on the other hand, traces Jesus' lineage back to Adam, presenting him as the Son of Man and linking him to all humanity. So the genealogies serve different purposes for different audiences.
Now, the thing with the differences between Matthew and Luke, Matthew is more the person that should have the right is the next one in line. Whereas in Luke, it's more I think they call it the cadet line. Can you just describe what that means?
Sure. In genealogical terms, the royal line in Matthew's genealogy means it focuses on the direct legitimate line of succession, emphasizing the rightful heir. Luke's cadet line traces a more lateral or collateral line, which may include branches that were not the direct heirs but still related. This approach highlights a broader connection to humanity rather than just the royal lineage.
And the one thing I find really fascinating, especially, and this, Luke highlights this, is that when it comes to this cadet line, in every time someone like the firstborn that should be legitimate and they should have it every time in the Bible, every single time, and you can tell me if there is anybody apart from Jesus, of course, if there is anybody that should have had it, but they don't, and then it goes to someone else. Can you explain that a little bit more? Because when I heard this, it was just so amazing that...
Certainly. In the Bible, the principle of the firstborn inheriting the rights is often upheld, but there are exceptions. For instance, Esau was the firstborn of Isaac, but lost his birthright to Jacob. Similarly, King David, though not the eldest son of Jesse, was chosen to be king instead of his older brothers. These instances show that the inheritance of rights and positions is not always determined strictly by birth order, but can be influenced by God's choice or specific circumstances. In Luke's genealogy, this broader inclusion might be highlighting a more inclusive view of Jesus' heritage and mission.
And it's also it's also, if you can just go through it, apart from Jesus, who is the firstborn son, is there anybody else that should have been the firstborn, but they weren't?
Apart from Jesus, another notable example is Joseph.
Oh.
He was the 11th son of Jacob,
11th.
but received a double portion of inheritance through his sons Ephraim and Manasseh. This reflects a broader principle in the Bible, where God's choice can override traditional birthright conventions.
Yeah, and every time someone should have had the birthright or they legally had it, somehow they lost it, and
exactly.
The
Bible often shows God choosing someone other than the firstborn or expected heir. For instance, Isaac over Ishmael, Jacob over Esau, and David over his older brothers. This pattern emphasizes that God's plans and choices sometimes defy human expectations or traditions.
All right, so there you have it. George 7120, I have gone through this question, and the first one, yes, I've already done that one, and that'll be linked in a minute. And I think, are the two genealogies in Joseph contradictory? No, they are complementary, and they are giving two different stories for two different audiences and approaching the same history in a different way. And they're not contradicting each other. They are actually two very, you might say they're separate, but they're not really. They're the same history, just for a different point or a different reason. So go do something awesome for God, and you can catch that other one here, or you can even go through another one. If you feel like there are contradictions in the Bible, I'm going through one a week, and there's another contradiction right there. Catch you later. Go do something awesome for God. We'll catch you in the next one.